Hello Tenno, Zelp here. In today's video, we are going to talk about the truth behind Magnetize, which is Mag's second ability. Magnetize has been around for a very long time, but I realize not many people know how it truly works. So today we are going to bust some myths and find out some of the best ways to make this skill serve you. As an accurate but short summary to this skill, it attracts projectile towards the target you cast on, damage done is amplified double by default, 25% of the initial damage will be absorbed and dealt to the enemy inside the globe as damage over time. If the globe were to explode, by default it will deal the total damage over time dealt with an additional 300 blast damage. Both damage amplified and explosion damage is affected by power strength, and this summary is made based on my research. So if what I just said makes sense to you, you probably have the mechanics of Magnetize figured out already, but don't go just yet because there is more. So let's see what that statement actually means. So over here we have the Volcar, and it has mainly impact damage and a total of 225 damage. So I'm going to summon a test subject, which is a crawler at level 145. Then I'm going to use Magnetize on it and I'm going to shoot him. Here you'll see 932 damage, and how the damage gets so high is basically the 225 damage from your Volcar. You multiply 2 for a headshot and also 2 again because of the Magnetize multiplier. After that, you'll see a damage over time happening at the background, and it's doing about 56 damage. So how do you get 56 damage? It's basically the initial damage, which is 225 damage, times the Magnetize multiplier, which is in this case 2, and with that amount you divide it by 4 because you want 25% out of this damage, and that will give you the damage per second it will do. However, the ticks that you see is actually happening every half a second. So all you have to do is take the damage per second divided by 2, and that will give you about 56 damage. Finally, we come to the explosion damage, which what you have to do is add up all of the tick damage in per second and then add the initial 300 blast damage that your skill does, and that will give you your explosion damage. In this case, I've counted, we did 16 ticks, and those are half a second, so we have actually a total of 8 seconds. So knowing that, we can actually calculate and come up with a value that looks something like this. Just to make sure that we are on the same page, I'm going to do a really quick example, and everything's going to be the same. It's going to be the same weapon, it's going to be the same enemy. The only thing that's different is that this time I'm going to have Intensify on. That's going to give me 30% extra power strength. Okay, so the first hit is going to be 225 times the headshot multiplier of 2, because this enemy is basically all heads, no pun intended, times the Magnetize multiplier, which now goes up to 2.6 because of Intensify, and that's going to give you about 1170 damage. Now you're going to realize that there is a bit of a damage difference. Now that is due to the slash damage on the weapon, and is because of the damage modifier. I'm trying to keep this simple, so we're not going to go that in depth and calculate that as well. So just to keep in mind that there is a slight damage difference, and that is okay. Now the next thing we need to check is the damage per tick. Okay, so we're going to take 225 damage times the modifier from the Magnetize, which is 2.6, and divide it by 4 because you want only 25%. And that should give you about 146.25 damage per second. Now again, the ticks that you see is happening every half a second, so all you have to do is divide it by 2 and you should get your 73 damage per tick. Now I've counted, and there is about 9 ticks here, so that is going to give us about 4.5 seconds because the 9 ticks is based off every half a second. So I believe what the game kind of does is that 4.5 is not a full 5 seconds, so it will actually round down to only 4 seconds. So what you have to do now is you take that 4 seconds, you times the damage per second that the ticks are doing, and then now you just have to add them up together and plus the blast damage that you'll be doing. Now the blast damage is no longer just 300 blast damage, it's going to go up to 390 because of intensify as well, because that is going to be affected, and then you should get about 1000 damage. So in case if you haven't noticed, the body part multiplier is not taken into account in the damage per tick, therefore it does not affect the damage of the explosion as well. And there is also another thing that does not include in the calculation, which is criticals. So for example, okay, that's not a critical. Let me just get a critical out of this. Not a critical as well. So you can see that when I do not crit, I'm actually doing 56 damage. And there you go, there is a crit. And let's take a look at the tick. It's also 56 tick damage every half a second. So critical does not take into account on the tick damage, therefore it does not affect the explosion as well. The next thing I want to talk to you guys about is explosive weapons. So over here we have the Auguras, which is a pretty decent weapon. It has 700 blast damage with no mods on, way better than that sniper that we were playing with just now, which was like what, 225 damage I think. So we're gonna test it with the same enemy at level 145 as well. And do take note that the initial damage is really high, but the tick damage per tick every half a second is actually really low. So it's only like 24 damage every half a second. And because of the low tick damage, we know that this is going to cause the explosion at the end really low damage as well, because of the formula and also the calculations that we did just previously. So what's going on here, this weapon has such a high base damage, such a high initial damage, but why is the tick damage so low? So let me explain. Now the majority of explosive weapon has two instances. The first one is where the projectile is being traveled and it does a small amount of damage, followed by when the projectile actually explodes and do an explosion damage. So the problem here is that Magnetize will take the first damage done in a shot. So for in this case, it is the projectile damage, or some people call this the collision damage. And if you take a look at the Auguras over here, now I believe there is some kind of error here, I'm not too sure, but if you were to go to the Auguras personal page, you'll actually see here it says charge attack is 100, AoE attack is 600, and together you come down to that 700 value that we saw in the arsenal. So the whole tick damage is actually based on the charge attack, which is only 100. Use this 100 value, do the calculation, and it comes around that small amount of value. So in other words, what I'm trying to say here is that if you're trying to use a explosive weapon to generate high field damage so that the magnetized explosion will do higher damage, basically it's not going to work out that well. Explosive weapon like the Talon is even funnier because the Talon actually does not do any initial collision damage. So it does have the blast damage. So for example now, so although it does a lot of damage, it does not generate any tick because the collision damage is 0. So now the next thing I'd like to talk about that is really weird is shotguns, and more specifically hit scan shotguns. So over here I have the Boar, and it has a collective damage of 176 if my calculations are correct. And if you could do a racial comparison, ratio with the sniper, which is 225, and that did like 56 damage per tick. So this one should be, I don't know, maybe 40 or at least 30-ish damage per tick, right? So again, same enemy, same level. I don't know why I like to pick on this enemy so much. Okay, so fire, and let's wait. Can you see it? Can you see it? Can you see the amount of damage? I get 6 damage from the bore. So what the hell is going on here? Now let me explain. If you were to look at the bore, it has 8 pellets per round. So you're actually firing 8 pellets, and the damage of 176 is distributed to all those 8 pellets. Now if you divide them and find the damage of 1 pellet and then do the calculations on that 1 pellet, and you'll realize that the damage per tick you're getting is actually based off that 1 pellet. Son of a bitch. Now this applies to other shotguns as well, as long as it is a hit scan shotgun. So for example, the Tigris Primes, the Struns, they all have this problem. So again, if you're trying to create damage for the explosion of Magnetize with a shotgun, better luck doing with something else. Finally, a beam weapon, or should I call it a discharge projectile type weapon. So you guys heard the rumors on how a beam weapon, if you use it on a Magnetize, is going to sort of charge it up and do big boom at the end. So sadly, I'm here to tell you that that is just a rumor and it is not true. Now I've heard big YouTubers talking about it, I have friends talking to me about it. I was a believer. I believe that it works until now, because after doing the calculations, the research, and understanding how Magnetize work, I could see no way of a beam weapon doing more damage such that the explosion at the end is gonna increase. So I'm not gonna bore you with the calculations. Instead, I'm just gonna show you a really quick, simple comparison as an example. So over here I have the Quanta, and it is not modded with anything. So it does 220 electricity damage, and it has a fire rate of 1. So this basically means 220 damage per second. And I'm gonna summon 2 charger at level 100. And what I'm gonna do is, from here I am going to magnetize them both, and then rush over and focus on 1. Okay, so it's taking the left one. So I'm gonna shoot him until it dies, and then we're gonna see how much explosion damage it does to its friend next to him. There you go, it's dead. Here it comes. There you go. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna repeat the whole thing again with a Breton. And this one I have fast hand in because the magazine size is not as big as the Quanta, which could continuously shoot until the enemy dies. This one do need to reload, so there is some disadvantage, or there a delay, which you're not doing actual DPS. However, I do have a Stormbringer here, and all this damage, if you add them up times the fire rate, should give you about 227 damage per second. Okay, and that is pretty much what we're trying to do here, using this to compare with the Quanta. So they're both doing a similar damage output. Now this weapon does have a little bit of a advantage in terms of it has slash damage, but not a lot. Okay, so again, pick one and start firing. So it looks like it's taking the one at the left as well. Reload. So just basically keep shooting until it dies. There you go. I'm going to take a look at the blast damage on this. Okay. I feel like it might not be hard to see why people might think that the beam weapon is good for Magnetize, simply because if at any point you were to compare it with a hit scan shotgun, the laser is gonna win. If you were to compare with a critical weapon, the laser is gonna win. If you were to compare with an explosive weapon, the laser is gonna win. And so in many ways, if you do not know why the laser is winning, it's not because the beam weapon is better, it's because all the other weapons kind of suck at this. Then you would actually believe or think that the beam weapon is better. Now let's take a look at the Lanka, because this weapon synergizes with Magnetize really well. Now I have a half-ass modded Lanka, the whole reason why it's not fully modded is because I just don't have the time to do it. So here is 8 heavy gunners at level 145. So let's just get a closer view. I'm gonna shoot them right over here. You can see that the bullet travels and goes around them over and over again and eventually kills them all. So this is the thing that we're going to talk about, the few factors that makes the Lanka really strong. The first one is punch through. So the bullet, whenever it hits the enemy, it doesn't die off straight away. It will continue on, and because of Magnetize, it gets sucked back in and it goes around it and keeps hitting enemies and eventually killing them all without expiring or without disappearing. So the Lanka has a punch through of, by default, 5 meters. So it can go through 5 meters worth of enemies before it actually disappears. Now this includes walls and floors as well. So for example, if you were to shoot the Lanka's bullet in a different manner, so like for example, if you were to shoot the top instead, so the bullet will actually swirl from top to bottom and it hits the floor many times, and therefore it will expire or exhaust that 5 meter punch through rate. However, if you shoot it at the side and it doesn't hit the floor, it can go on for really long. Oh shit. So yeah, that is one technique that you can use with the Lanka and some other weapons as well to increase the lifespan of the projectile by not shooting from the top. This way it doesn't hit the floor. Shooting at the side, it will swirl around and it could do more damage. However, this means that this technique doesn't actually work in a confined space. When a confined space, there are walls around and the bullet's just going to hit the wall so many times that it will die off. Now there is another thing about this Lanka that makes it not very good with Magnetize. Let's say if I were to put in a unmodded Lanka just so that you can see the damage, and I'm going to use ancient healers this time. Let's put there 8. Okay, let's magnetize them. Go really close. Oops. I'm going to shoot from top. Okay, so it swirls around a little bit and then it stops. Now the Lanka hit them more than once, definitely, but the ticks that you see is only about 30 or 20-ish. Okay, that reason is because even though the Lanka sort of hit them many times, so let's just do it at the side here this time. Even though it hits them many times, the Magnetize only account for the first hit fired. So whatever subsequent hits that it does not trigger the ticks, so therefore it does not actually charge up the final damage of the explosion in Magnetize. So again, you can see about 30 to 28 or 27, and that's all. I realized increasing the flight speed of the projectile on the Lanka actually makes the projectile move away from the center a little bit more. So that could actually be not a very good thing, because this means there is more opportunity of hitting the floors and hitting the walls, and therefore making it disappear a lot sooner. So you can actually see the projectile seemingly going off the bubble here. Now there's a lot of weapons that can actually do this same thing. The few things that I realized that you need to have is it needs to be either an energy based weapon, or you are sort of throwing a projectile that is sort of a item or object. Over here you have something like the Dara Vandal, which is a energy based weapon, so that actually works. There's also the Dragoon. Now this Dragoon, although rated as a shotgun, it is not a hit scan shotgun, so those projectile can actually soar around a little bit before it disappears. So it's actually pretty good with this synergy as well. You can throw the Ferox and it will stay on. Of course there's a Lanka. The meter works pretty well as well, but I want to talk to you about the Penta. Now the Penta fires it's rated as one of the explosive weapon, and it has a projectile that looks like that, And the thing about this projectile is that there is no punch through. However, it does not expire until you remove it manually or if you detonate it this way. So what happens here is that because it doesn't expire, you can actually, if you have a really long ass Magnetize, you can actually fire all this and it will keep doing damage as long as you want, simply because it doesn't expire. However, the damage is not very high because again it's an explosive weapon, so the damage that you're dealing is actually just the collision damage, and since it only takes in the first damage to account, it also doesn't really charge up the whole magnetized damage that well. So over here there is a Mara Detron, and it is an energy based weapon, so the bullets does actually soar around. It's radiation based, and also it kind of works like a shotgun as well. Now the thing about this weapon, which is something that I learned from watching a YouTuber, I believe it is Distant Observer. It's a great channel, you should definitely check it out. So I'm gonna put the link at the description, and I'm not gonna actually show you the demonstration, but I'm just gonna talk about it. And what I believe is happening is that when you have radiation on, it actually makes the enemies attack against each other. That attack will be amplified with your magnetized amplification, damage amplification. So let's take a look at shards. So apparently if you use your third skill, which is polarize, on enemies that has shield or armor, shards will pop out, and those shards can be attracted by magnetize and deal damage as well. Now those damage are in terms of the damage per tick, and it would seem like the shard damage has a fixed amount on shields, but on anything else it does seem to scale with power strength, but not a lot. Now in the description it actually says that shards, which becomes deadly when mixed with magnetize, is only deadly if you're playing with like level 1 or 5 characters. Otherwise shards are really low damage. So let me show you what I mean. Over here I have a mag with a 100 power strength, and I'm going to use the rattle at level 100 as the test subject, and I'm going to cast magnetize from here. Okay, run over there, and I'm going to use my polarize. So right now you can see that there is 2 shards, and the amount of shards that pops out is random from 1 to 2 per enemy. Okay, and now there's 3, so it's doing 33 damage. Now there's 4, it's doing 44 damage. And see what happens when it hit the health. It suddenly goes to 50 damage, from 44 to 50. Whoa. So over here I have bumped up my power strength to 145% with power drift and also intensify. And we're gonna do that same exact experiment again with the same enemy at the same level. Now what you realized just now is that the shards on the shield does about 11 damage on the shields. So let's see how much we do now. Again, there's 1 shard and it's doing 11 damage on the shields. Okay, now there is 2 shards, it's doing 21 damage. Okay, now there's 4 and it's doing 44. Now look at what happens when it hits the health. It increases from just now, which is only 50, to 73 now. So in conclusion, the shards does a fixed 11 damage or so per tick on shields, and if it reaches the health type, that damage is scaled with power strength. Now the problem with fighting armored enemies is that the damage reduction does affect the shards as well. The damage of the shards is actually exactly your power strength per second. So for example, the first case with 100% power strength, you actually see 50 damage every half a second, which means that you're dealing 100 damage per second, same as your power strength. On the second case, we had 145 power strength and we saw 73 damage every half a second, which means that it's actually dealing about 145 damage per second. So due to the video actually becoming a little bit too long right now, I'm gonna cut this thing short. I actually have a lot of things that I want to share with you guys from my findings, but let's just go right in and just talk about things that kind of synergize really well, especially with the new mod that we got, Magnetize Discharge, that allows you to detonate the Magnetize early. Okay, so right there you saw my mag build. It is not modded with any power strength, and over here is not a format Dracoon, and I'm going to tell you why I'm using a Dracoon, because Dracoon is one of the most powerful weapon that could go with this to increase the explosion damage. Okay, so we're not talking about damage overall like the Lanka could do. We're talking about the explosion damage because we want to detonate the Magnetize and do that explosion damage. So let's just take a look at ancient healers. Now I'm not going to go with heavy gunners at the moment because heavy gunners armor is has the ability to resist damage from the explosion, and it's just not very impressive. However, I am going to show you a different way to fight against heavy gunners. Okay, so right now I'm going to use Magnetize. They're all lumped up together, and I'm going to shoot right here. It doesn't really matter, it's just that because of the curve. So you can see there is a lot of damage going on. It's about 800 per tick. Okay, all you have to do is, I don't know, wait for 3 seconds or something, and then detonate it. Okay, now I'm just going to show you again because obviously it has been ticking for a really long time. There's also another thing that I want you guys to note is that when there are more than one enemy, the ticks from those enemies is also registered as absorbed damage. That means the more enemy you have in the magnetized globe, the more ticks or more damage is being absorbed, so therefore the explosion is going to be huge. Okay, so let's do that again, and let's just see how fast we can kill the infested. Okay, so there you go. Let's do one hit. Okay, let's wait for 5 ticks. I think that's enough. Let's detonate it. Boom, everything died. Okay, in about 5 seconds. I believe you can actually do it with lesser if you have if you actually have power strength on your mag, and also if you have your Dracoon mod up properly. For armored enemy, I would actually suggest going with the pox. So I'm going to show you how I mod it. It's basically with high status chance and blast with corrosive. So what basically blast does is that when the enemy gets blast and knocked down, it will actually be pulled by Magnetize to the center, and that will actually cause your POC to be more effective because it can proc more status on more enemies. Okay, so that is the whole idea here. So let's take a look at how it looks like. Ooh, there is a hot fix. Okay, so over here is 145 heavy gunners. I'm gonna summon 8 of them, and then I'm going to do my Magnetize. They're all going to lump together. Okay, so I'm going to shoot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the idea is that you just want to see, there you go, the armor is gone, and immediately when the armor is gone you can actually explode it, and that will kill them all. So about, I don't know, 5 hits, sometime 4, sometime even 3. So I guess that's all for this video. Thanks so much for watching. If you managed to make it to the end, definitely leave a comment and I will praise you. I will praise you so bad that please don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye Thanos, have a pleasant day.